Here is my story of a close encounter with HIV, though it could be anyone's. I was 20 years old and I met a boy at a party. It was lust at first sight, though things eventually grew more romantic between us, and we became boyfriends. We decided to have an open relationship. We also decided to stop using condoms in our relationship, but we'd keep using them with anyone else we fucked. We had just been tested and we were both HIV negative, so we thought this was a pretty good arrangement for us both. Of course, we'd seen all the campaigns about safe sex, but I guess it's just not always the most important thing that people think about when we're in the heat of the moment. He went back home to visit his family over Christmas. While he was away, he had sex with somebody he knew there, and they didn't use a condom. He didn't tell me when he got back. We went on holidays shortly after. He became very sick and stayed in bed for a lot of the trip. Thinking back, this must have been when he seroconverted. We were continuing to have unsafe sex within our relationship. Shortly after we got back from our holiday, I decided to get a sexual health check, as we were both sexually active outside of our relationship. Though for me it had been closer to a year since my last test, my boyfriend had tested fairly recently. I asked him to come along with me anyway, as I didn't want to go and get tested alone. We were out shopping a few days later when he got a phone call, asking him to come into the clinic right away. I went along with him. His result had come back positive, mine negative. As we'd been having unprotected sex quite a lot, and HIV is highly transmissible shortly after seroconversion, the sexual health nurse got us both to speak to a counsellor. The doctor put me on a heavy treatment of PEP, post-exposure prophylaxis, a course of antiretroviral medication that helps to prevent people acquiring HIV if they might have had a risky incident. It can be accessed at an emergency department or by calling the PEP Hotline. I can't remember if I was angry with my boyfriend at the time, but I do remember how much he cried, and I remember thinking that if I became HIV positive as well, then at least we'd go through it together. Considering we broke up a year later, I'm glad I remained negative. I was on PEP for a month and was very ill. I was tested again after an anxious 3-month wait, and my results came back negative. My boyfriend and I still had sex with each other, but now we used condoms and other ways to reduce my risk. I'm not sure if it was the dose of PEP or just luck that allowed me to avoid contracting HIV. While there are a lot of different types of relationships that people choose to have, there can come a time when it stops being so casual and people might want to stop using condoms with one another. There's a way of doing this safely. It's called the 4 T's, or talk, test, trust. The first step is to talk to your partner. You need to make some sort of agreement about the sort of sex you're having. If you're monogamous, that's great, but you should talk about what happens if one of you does slip up and has sex with somebody else. Then you both get tested. If you're both negative, awesome. But there's also a window period of up to 3 months where the test might not pick up a recent HIV infection. So step 3 is test again, 3 months later, just to be sure. The last step is trust. At this stage, you can be sure you're both negative if you haven't been having unsafe sex with anyone else, so it's safe to stop using condoms with each other. However, it's important that you trust one another. If one of you does slip up, it's important that you're able to talk about it. Maybe you should decide to go back to using condoms if this happens, just to be sure. Trust is always the most difficult part of any relationship, but good communication is key to ensuring that this trust is kept. Though we were in a serodiscordant relationship for over a year, I'm still HIV negative today. It's possible to date guys living with HIV and remain negative by taking precautions. Together, we can end HIV.